I'm Mark Recchi. You're watching FSN Pittsburgh, where Penguin fans come first.
They'll pose for the team picture.
The Penguins had barely had time to celebrate their first Stanley Cup championship when tragedy befell the team. Badger Bob Johnson, the coach that had led them to that improbable Stanley Cup title, was diagnosed with a brain tumor just a few short weeks after the Penguins had won their first Stanley Cup.
That night, we won the Cup, and on the bus with him and his wife, and he was very quiet, very subdued, and he was being bothered at that time by headaches and problems, and little did any of us know in the celebration that that was probably the embryonic stages of what developed into a brain tumor.
He was coaching the Canada Cup team. We're based here in Pittsburgh, and he was having problems. You could tell with his balance, and parts of his body weren't working properly, and so we went in for some tests, and that's when we knew. So it was during that training camp, getting ready for the Canada Cup.
I don't think anybody had a clue that he was that sick.
We knew that he had some brain cancer, but you know, when you meet Badger Bob, you're just like, there's no way this is going to keep him down. There's just no way. He's got too much fight and too much spirit in him. He'll be back. Even through training camp, I think we still thought that. Come to find out later that a lot of people knew he was a lot worse off than the players knew.
The illness to Badger Bob was the biggest of several issues hanging over the 91-92 Penguins. 3 top players were also holding out: Ron Francis, Kevin Stevens, and Mark Recchi.
We get into those situations all the time, and it's not personal, it's just business, and the players understand that too. At first you have a sense that they think it's personal, but once you talk to them, talk it all out with them, they understand.
It was a mess, you know. I was trying to get a contract signed, and Craig was, he was offering what Craig was doing what he was doing, and I was doing what I was doing. And Milbury gave me a contract with the Bruins. It's, I didn't want to go to the Bruins, and I wanted to stay here, but I signed a contract, and he had 7 days a match, and thank God he matched it, because I really want to stay here and be here. I didn't want to go.
That's never a good time. It's never fun missing. I think it really hurts you over the first. Training camp's very important. If you miss some time, it hurts you, for a while.
And at least some of the players might have been suffering from a Stanley Cup hangover.
That year went late. Not too many of us used to playing that late in the season. So you're talking about not finishing until, I think we finished right at the beginning of June or something like that. So your summer becomes very short, and that's a taxing year. I mean, you play all your exhibition games, you go through the season like we did, you go through, go as long as you can in the postseason. Win the Stanley Cup, you've got all that stuff surrounding that.
You get a little fat in the summer, that fat cat syndrome of enjoying the Stanley Cup, and I don't think we probably were, our frame of mind and probably physically as well, we probably weren't where we had to be.
We were now on the top of the mountain, and everybody was going to try to knock us off. So there was a bit of a fear factor involved, but there's an incredible amount of pride in that hockey team.
Even so, the Badgers' worsening condition became evident, and the spirits of the team plummeted.
Towards the end, it was pretty hard to watch. Remember, we went to see him in Denver, I believe, the whole team in training camp, and he was at the end, and it was very difficult for us to accept that.
It was tough. I mean, we tried to spend some time with him in the hospital a couple times, and his speech was getting worse and worse, and it was tough to see him like that. But he was still so positive at the end. I mean, I went in there, all he was worried about was talking to me about getting me back to playing. I was like, I don't really care right now. I'm here to visit, so.
That hurt. It took away from a lot of the, what made our team. He made our team. He was the team. He was the guy that brought us to where we want to be.
Scotty Bowman took over as coach on an interim basis, and the Penguins struggled to find their way. And a little over a month into the season, the inevitable happened. On November 26th, Bob Johnson passed away at the age of 60. The next night, prior to a game against the Devils, the Penguins held a candlelight ceremony to honor their former coach and friend.
The most moving thing I've ever seen in sports. I literally, obviously, had tears in my eyes. It just seemed so unfair that a man who could give so much and love the game so much and love life so much had it all taken away in such a short period of time.
It was pretty emotional. I think there was a lot of tears in players' eyes, and it was just it happened so quickly. It happened so quickly, and he was just a big part of our family.
Oh, I bawled my eyes out. I cried like a baby. I remember standing at center ice, and I'm sure I wasn't the only guy crying that night.
He was such a great person. I mean, coaches will always have respect because they're coaches, but I had a ton of respect for him as a person. He just was a genuine, positive person that really enjoyed hockey number one and life number two.
And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, I can tell you that right now. And it was a great way to have the team be involved and the fans as well.
I think we're all glad, that we got the opportunity to win a Stanley Cup with him, because a guy like that deserved it.
The Penguins won that night, but it soon became apparent that winning another Stanley Cup would not be easy. Scotty Bowman was already a Hall of Fame coach when he took over as the Penguins' interim coach during Bob Johnson's illness. His resume included 5 Stanley Cup championships, but his style was a direct contrast to that of the Badger.
A little bit different. A little different style, definitely a different coaching style.
You had Bob Johnson who would ask you if you were eating oatmeal for breakfast, Scotty wasn't going to ask you what you're eating for breakfast, I'll tell you that. He was going to make sure that, he was going to ask you, what the heck were you doing on that play? It was a big adjustment for a lot of players.
Huge adjustment. Yeah, 180 degrees. There was a big conflict in my mind between Scotty Bowman and the Pittsburgh Penguins when Scotty first came here. And Scotty's a great coach, great bench coach, brilliant man. You could ask him right now what my stats are, and he'd probably reel them off to you. He's that smart of a man when it comes to hockey, but that chemistry wasn't there.
He couldn't stop being the way he always was with the Canadians and, with the other teams that he'd coached. He playing mind games with people and things like that. And I think that, our guys just didn't want to put up with it. They felt they were above that. We don't need that stuff around here right now. We're the Stanley Cup champions. We know what we need to do to be successful. Let's not screw it up by creating any undue acrimony or making the air any thicker than it needs to be. And that's kind of the way Scotty liked it. He liked to create that dynamic of conflict, and I think he felt that was important. That was the way he kept his teams on edge.
He's probably one of the best bench coaches ever in the game. He studies tapes on matchups, and he's amazing what he can do behind the bench. So you have to kind of keep him away from too much contact with the players because he upsets them. But he was perfect for what we needed at the time. We had a great team. He just had to work the matchups, and he did a great job.
Steve Shutt, who played for him in Montreal and won multiple cups, said, asked about Scotty, he said, you hate him for 364 days a year, and on the 365th you pick up your Stanley Cup ring.
But the Stanley Cup ring was still a long ways away when another distraction came along. Penguins owner Ed DeBartolo announced the sale of his team on November 18th. DeBartolo had been a reluctant owner from the beginning.
He had no desire at all to want a hockey club. But he got involved with some friends and mortgage bankers and people that bought into the hockey club, and they started losing money, and they borrowed money from him. And then they came back again, and they borrowed more money, and he eventually said, I got this. He took it over. So now he's got a hockey club. He's in the mall business. You know, Ed DeBardo, Sr. So as it turns out, Ed DeBardo, Sr. becomes involved, ends up liking hockey.
The new ownership group was headed by Howard Baldwin, who had more of a hockey background, but not everyone was sure that Baldwin was ready for a long-term commitment.
I will bet you $1,000 you're not the owner 5 years from now. You want to bet 1,000? I do that.
I'll bet you $1,000. How's that?
Good enough. You got a lot of
You all are witness.
You know, I think he wanted to, regardless of what the cost was and the long-term effect that it had, he was willing to keep a lot of the players around, for right or for wrong, and not quite looking at you know, what effect it may have down the road.
Howard Baldwin came in, and he likes winning too.
Baldwin also won his bet, but in the meantime, his newly acquired team continued to struggle on the ice.
But, you know, we knew we had a good team still. It was just a matter of getting in the right direction.
You know, guys were upset because we weren't doing well, and that's just competitive guys on the team, and we were upset and knew we weren't playing, and you know, we were trying to figure ways why we weren't, you know, why we weren't being the team we needed to be.
We're underachieving, you know, for the kind of roster we have. There is no excuse for it.
There was a lot of talk about be patient, be patient, be patient. You know, and about mid-season, you know, we had some conversations in the locker room that was okay. You know what? Patience is over here, fellas. Let's really get this thing moving now. It's time to step it up and start playing because we're just not consistently winning.
And with his team floundering, GM Craig Patrick decided it was time to take matters in hand.
Penguins were on the verge of dropping out of the playoff picture with only weeks to go in the season, and something had to be done.
The Penguins' struggles during much of the 1991-92 season had many causes, but the play of Mario Lemieux and Kevin Stevens were not among them. Injuries limited Lemieux to just 64 games, but he still managed a league-best 131 points. Stevens set records for an American-born player and a left wing with his 123 points.
For those 3 or 4 seasons, he was unbelievable and just a force. And I think because of what happened in the Boston series the year before, when he was the guy who stepped forward and gave you the Joe Namath, you know, we're going to win this when you're down 0-2. And then he scored a goal in Game 3 of the first year, and he really, you know, had not just had the voice, but he had credibility as a leader.
2 1/4, we always said 2 1/4, 2 1/4. That was Kevin Stevens, 225, but he was a guy that had 200 minutes and penalties every year, and the guy that scored 50 goals. Can't beat that.
He was that young, that strong, that powerful, that good, that hungry. He just had the package that you wanted in the pure power forward. Speed. He was the horse.
But despite the brilliance of Stevens and Lemieux, the Penguins were still floundering. And on February 19th, Craig Patrick swung a blockbuster deal for the second straight season. This one sent Paul Coffey to Los Angeles and Mark Recchi to Philadelphia, with the Penguins getting forward Rick Tocchet, defenseman Shel Samuelson, and goalie Ken Reggett back from the Flyers.
We were going round and round and round about that trade, and you know, about 3 o'clock one morning I was home lying in bed, and I got up and I went down to the kitchen table and said, you know, I couldn't get the deal done. It was something missing. I just couldn't figure it out. And in talking with LA and other teams around, I knew what was available, so I had this idea what I could do with Philadelphia to get Tocchet and Samuelson and Reggett if I included LA in a deal, with Coffey going to LA and I get a first-round pick, and it just kind of made everything work for Philadelphia, and LA was happy and we were ecstatic. So
Paul Coffey called me at like 6 in the morning, told me that we'd both been traded. So yeah, I had no idea. So yeah, there wasn't a lot swirling around, but yeah, so it was a real big shock. So
Koff goes to LA, and then we end up losing Mark Recchi to Philadelphia. And that's when you kind of went, whoa, what's going on here? Because you talk about 2 incredible hockey players and keys to winning the first Stanley Cup, but also great guys in the room, incredibly well-liked. That was a real heartbreaker for a lot of guys.
None of those trades are any fun because you're losing your friends more than anything, you know. And you know, when they make them, they know it's, you know, they know it's going to be hard, but they know something has to change too.
We needed a little more size and grit, and that was a really hard trade too because of Mark Recchi. That was a tough trade for us to make.
When those guys came in and the way that the talk had just gelled with our team and brought that toughness, and a guy who'd gone through so many tough years in Philadelphia not winning a Stanley Cup, he brought such a different kind of excitement and different kind of life to our team that a lot of guys fed off Rick Tocchet when he came in that dressing room.
Talk was unbelievable, and he was tough, and he would do anything. You know, if anybody touched anybody, didn't matter if it was Mario, me, or this guy, Joe Blow. I mean, Tocchet was going to go in there and beat the living, you know, daylights out of him. That was Rick Tocchet. It didn't matter. He'd score goals. He'd do this, do, you know. So you imagine you got Mario and you got Rick Tocchet and you got Kevin Stevens. You know, who's going to touch Mario? You know what I mean?
I played against, you know, the Tocchet so much with the Flyers, and you know, a couple of weeks prior he breaks my nose in a fight. So I mean, you know, good and bad. I know what kind of player he is. He comes to play every night. On a personal level, it's tough to sit next to a guy that just busted your nose. But very competitive, always in there. And Kjell Samuelsson was like trying to play against a condor. I mean, he's got a wingspan of like 8 feet. His stick, you know, goes up past my head, so you just can't get around him. You know, and he also was another competitive guy.
Again, it was a question of some toughness, a little bit more defensive presence with Kjell Samuelsson back there. Not unlike what we needed the previous year. And, you know, Tocchet turned out to be a tremendous player.
We knew we were getting a needed toughness and a good player in Rick Tocchet. We knew we were getting size and strength in Kjell Samuelsson on the blue line that we needed. And we got a legitimate backup goalie with Kenny Reggett. Not that we didn't have that, but, you know, it was almost like an added bonus that we got a guy like Kenny Reggett.
But unlike the trade of the previous year, this move did not immediately spark the team. And as the losing continued, a simmering feud between Scotty Bowman and some of the players finally came to a boil.
We were frustrated with him. No doubt about it. I'll say it. A lot of guys are frustrated. Frustrated with ice time, frustrated with how they were used, frustrated with how we were ending up in some games, losing some games.
I remember it was March 2nd. We were out on our last Western swing, playing Calgary, Edmonton. We were in Calgary in the hotel room, and the captains had called a meeting with Craig.
Scotty stayed in Buffalo to be with his family for a day, so it was an opportunity for the players to vent what they needed to vent.
And I remember sitting in that room, and that was an emotional meeting. It was right before we played Calgary Flames. And a lot of guys stood up and said, what Scotty's doing is not right. This has to change. And I remember I was one of those guys. And I was one of the guys that I never thought you should rock the boat. Keep your mouth shut and just play the game. But I wanted to win so bad. I remember standing up and saying, Craig, we can't win with Scotty Bowman. We can't win with this guy.
It was a good meeting, and the players knew where I stood when it was over, and we went on from there.
And Craig just pretty well listened to everybody. And this was a real crossroads moment for our hockey team. I remember Craig saying, guys, what you're saying, most of it's true. You know, Scotty's personality, it's different than Bob's. You know, he's got to change a little bit. And I'll agree with most of what you guys are saying, except what you said, Borky. I don't agree with what you're saying. I believe we can win with Scotty Bowman, and we will win with Scotty Bowman.
I think it was an important meeting and really gave us a chance to move on and play as a team and work as a team down the stretch. And I think it had a lot to do with us being so close together towards the end of the season. Just in a few discussions I had with Craig, Craig was always like, well, you know, don't underestimate Scotty Bowman. Don't underestimate him. And I think as a group, we did through that year. We underestimated him.
And whether it was the meeting or just a talented team finally finding its way, the Penguins finished the 91-92 regular season with a flourish. Just as the 1991-92 Penguins had begun to find their stride at the end of the regular season, the players called a strike for April 1st, which seemed to threaten the Stanley Cup playoffs. After acrimony on both sides, the strike was eventually resolved about a week and a half later, and the Penguins returned to the ice, finishing the season with a flourish and climbing to third place in the Patrick Division. As the playoffs approached, the Penguins were on a roll.
You have to have that feeling that you can't be beat, you know, and that's what we had the prior year. We hadn't had it yet, and I think we were getting that feeling as we went into the playoffs that we're not going to be beat.
You know, we go through the year, you have a lot of ups and downs, but, you know, we always seem to be playing well when it's playoff time. Through March and April, you know, we always went like, you know, 12-5 or something like that, you know, going into the playoffs. And that's when you got to be playing well, and that's what our team did.
Do you get the sense that maybe this was a team that could flick the switch and had been through the experience of the year before where you realized you didn't have to be the best team from October to February. You just had to be the best team from late March, early April on.
But then the Penguins promptly fell behind the Washington Capitals 3-1 in the first round of the playoffs. And the Caps blew out the Penguins 7-2 in Pittsburgh in Game 4, behind a hat trick from Caps winger Dino Ciccarelli.
Well, I remember our producer was in the truck, and he said after we lost to go down 3-1, he was saying pukey, pukey Penguins. And people were down on people were booing the Penguins in this building. We got throttled by the Capitals.
I didn't think we truly at that point had a great chance of beating them. Their defense was incredible, and we didn't know how to stop them. We just couldn't stop them. We couldn't stop Dino, couldn't stop their defense. I mean, they had some offensive guys back there. We just had no answer for them.
I think for any team that wins the Stanley Cup, it's always important that, you know, you don't go out in the first round. But things happen. I mean, sometimes it's out of your control.
We didn't have an answer for what they were doing. They had a unique alignment because they had really good offensive defensemen, and their forwards were like defense, so they were upside down. Their forwards were generating, their defensemen were generating the offense, and their forwards were back checking and playing defense. So it was really a weird dynamic.
And so the players felt it was time to take matters into their own hands prior to Game 5 in Washington.
There was just a lot of frustration. And my recollection of memory, because I was getting a treatment at the time, was Ronnie Francis and Mario Lemieux were standing in the training room. Maybe they were talking before that, but they were saying, we just got to change the forecheck. We got to change our forecheck.
Yeah, we talked, Ronnie and I, and we just decided that you know, the best way for us to have a chance to win was to play a 1-4 delay, forecheck with one guy and have 4 guys back, and then put pressure once we get control of the puck. And you know, we were down 3-1, so we couldn't afford any mistakes defensively.
I said, guys, they might be onto something. We started our meeting, and Scotty goes, guys, if you just listen to me, you know, you've got to execute a little better. And I remember Mario saying, Scotty, it's just not working. It's not working, you know. Maybe we should go to a 1-4 or something like that. And Rick Keogh went up and started explaining the 1-4, and put 1 forechecker in versus 3, and kind of hold back and slow them up through neutral zone and give Tommy a little time to handle a puck.
If you look at the numbers, Ciccarelli had a 4-goal game early in that series, you know, and they were killing us. And so we played a kind of a left wing lock. We locked up on their right wingers. We had Bob Airy and Gordy Roberts on that left side, lock on those guys and not let them do their thing. And we set up that picket fence more or less and made them dump the puck in and let Barrasso handle the dump ins, and away we went.
But not before an emotional plea from Coach Scotty Bowman.
Remember Scotty saying, not like this, guys. Don't do it for yourselves. Don't do it for your family, your friends, but most importantly, don't do it for the city of Pittsburgh. Don't lose this way. If you're gonna go out, you're gonna go out. But go out fighting, go out leaving everything on the ice, but don't lose this way. Don't let the Washington Capitals just sweep you under the rug and put you down 4-1. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, he's right. We're the champs, not this way.
The Penguins won Game 5, 5-2, a pivotal victory in their drive for a second consecutive Stanley Cup.
Winning in Washington was huge. and just gave us a little bit of confidence. We just had to take it one step at a time there. I mean, we couldn't think any further than one game, one period, one shift at a time.
With us, it seemed like we held our own destiny. If we played the way we were capable of playing and did all the little things, chances are we're going to come out winners.
The Penguins came all the way back to win the series in 7 games, but they'd no sooner overcome adversity in the first round when they were faced with an even tougher challenge against the Rangers in round 2. The Penguins' overwhelming talent left teams trying to find ways to slow them down. Rangers coach Roger Nielsen, who had the NHL's best team during the regular season, felt that out-muscling the Penguins was the way to go. But that strategy took an ominous turn in Game 2 of the Patrick Division Finals when an Adam Graves slash broke Mary Lemieux's wrist and knocked him out of the series.
It swelled up pretty good, and it was black and blue, and I knew that I was going to be out for a while.
The natural conclusion that we drew was that Graves went out to get Mario, and if you look at the baseball swing, it certainly didn't look like he was, accidentally taking a shot at him. I mean, he was a perfectly placed slash on his hand.
Did he try to break his hand now? Was he trying to hit him pretty hard to make him think about stuff? Yeah, but if you get caught up in things as they're going along, especially as a team, as a whole, you lose your focus.
I believe it was KDK, the Rangers had a press conference, and Graves gave his apology, as you have to in those situations, and they played violin music. And Roger Nielsen refused to talk to the Pittsburgh media after the next game because of the outcry of what happened. Because he had said something like, well, once Lemieux was out of the game, I know he didn't mean it that way, but obviously the game changes in Mario. It wasn't like we tried to put Mario out of the game and it changed, but that's the way fans took it. So it became that, for the fans at least, that made the series personal.
He was vilified. I mean, he was a villain. He was lucky to get out of this city alive.
I remember coming back the next game in this building, and I had Adam Graves lined up in the corner, and I remember I just wanted to butt end him right in the face. I had that much bitterness towards him, and I remember Scotty and everybody saying, no, don't do it. They're looking for it. Let's just win the game. And that's all we were really focused on, was winning that series and, keeping our fingers crossed that Mario somehow, some way could come back.
To make matters worse for the Penguins, high-scoring forward Joey Mullen was knocked out of the playoffs in the same game Lemieux was slashed by Graves.
Yeah, we're losing goals. We're losing goals. We got to play a little smarter defensively. We got to play a whole lot. We got to find some goals someplace.
I went down, Mario went down, and team just had to keep on playing. The other guys stepped it up. Ronnie Francis stepped it up. I mean, he came out with some big goals in those next couple of games.
The psychological advantage had shifted to the Rangers. But then we turned it back around on them with the underdog mentality. We'll win without Mario. And Ronnie Francis and Rick Tocchet elevated their games, as did Jaromir Jagr, and we had enough talent that we were able to overcome it, for that series.
Yeah, I think I pulled that team together. I think we had to do it. We had to really bear down and get the job done.
We had Stevens in the series before with Caps pick it up and say, come with us. And then we have Francis in this series. I mean, Ronnie played tremendous in the series against the Rangers. He just, he was scoring like crazy. He was getting goals shooting from the blue line. I mean, he just had the magic touch then, and he was playing so well that it was just another case of when something would go wrong, or we would lose a player, or we needed a big play, somebody else would step in consistently.
After losing Game 1, the Rangers won Games 2 and 3 and had a 4-2 lead in Game 4 when Ron Francis struck. His blue line shot drew the Pens within 1, and after they tied it, Francis came through again in overtime. And in Game 5, it was Jaromir Jagr's turn. He scored on a rare penalty shot, but saved his best for last, scoring the game winner late in regulation of the Penguins' 3-2 win. And the Penguins won the clinching Game 6, 5-1, in front of a wildly celebrating crowd in Pittsburgh.
the Islander fans used to always chant 1940 at the Rangers. And the Penguin fans chanted 1940 in the deciding game. And I know the announcers, Jiggs McDonald, who had done Islanders games, said he never heard it chanted with the passion, even on the island, that it was chanted in Pittsburgh. And I think it was because players were injured and fans took that personally. You hurt our guys and we still beat you.
That's the only time I think in my whole career that I became somewhat emotionally involved when a series was over and when they won against the Rangers and the final buzzer went off. And the phrase that I used at the end of the game was, ladies and gentlemen, the New York Rangers have just left the building. And I had never done anything like that before. And I was just so overwhelmed by the fact that they had overcome the odds that they had to win the series against the Rangers. It was a dramatic moment. I mean, that's by far, to me, the most moving series that the Penguins may have ever had in their history.
The Bruins were up next for the right to go to the Stanley Cup Finals, and Jágr continued his hot play by scoring the Game 1 winner in overtime, the 4th straight game in which he'd scored the winning goal. And Lemieux, who was supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks, returned in 2 weeks instead, in time for Game 2 of the series.
We had a device that we worked on for a week before I came back to make sure that I would have a little bit of strength handling the puck and shooting the puck, and it worked. So it was pretty quick, but I wanted to be a part of it. When your team is this close to winning a Stanley Cup, you don't want to be up in the press box. You want to be down there with them, and that's why I came back so early.
Lemieux scored twice and added an assist in a 5-2 Game 2 victory. And then, back in Boston, the native son, Kevin Stevens, made a triumphant return with a natural first-period hat trick.
That was fun. I think that was one of the best games I've had. We came out flying in that first period. It was like, I know my line was, we were all over the place, and it was like in a small rink in the Garden, and it's like, it was phenomenal. That was fun. That was one of those games. Just pucks went in.
Stevens added a 4th goal for the Pens, who went on to sweep the Bruins 4 straight.
There's a lot left over from the year before and what Kevin Stevens did to the Boston Bruins. How we lost the first 2, go on to win the next 4. We go back into Boston again. The names and faces have changed in Boston, but it didn't matter. We had so much confidence at that point, and with Kevin on the roll again, we just bulldozed him 4 games straight. And really, at that point, I couldn't see, no matter which team it was in the league, I don't think there was a team that could have competed with us at that point, because we were really hitting on every single cylinder, and every guy, no matter if it was a 4th-line guy, Jock Callender or Dave Mikhailuk, whoever it was playing the best hockey of their lives.
And the Blackhawks were just about to find that out in the Stanley Cup Finals. The Penguins had won 7 straight heading into their Stanley Cup Finals series against Chicago, but Mike Keenan's Blackhawks were even hotter, having won an NHL record 11 consecutive playoff games. And their strategy was a familiar one. They would try to out-hit and bully the Penguins.
We thought it was kind of a little on the edge of like, boy, good try. This ain't working. It ain't gonna work. There wasn't one of our guys that was frazzled, not one.
We all knew, had played against Keenan when he was coaching in Philadelphia. We knew that they were going to, kind of try to be knuckleheads and try to run at us. And we knew that was going to occur, but we also knew that we had the team that could play better than them. And at that time, Belfour was not the goalie that he blossomed into afterwards. So we weren't like, it wasn't like, oh no, they got Eddie Belfour in net. And Hasek was the backup then. So it wasn't like we were scared of the goaltending. We were clicking on all cylinders. We were playing really well. I don't think there was, at least in my heart, there was no fear of that.
The Hawks jumped out to an early 3-0 lead in Game 1, but the Penguins battled back, finally getting on the board in the first period on a rare Phil Bourque power play goal.
Yeah, luckily I was able to get out there on the power play. When nothing else was working, they're like, oh, throw Bourque out there, why not? They got a wraparound goal against Belfort. I think that maybe got things, the hope was still there.
By the end of the second period, the Pens had closed to within one, thanks to a Mario Lemieux goal from behind goaltender Ed Belfour.
Yeah, I just ran out of room and was behind the goal line and faked a pass in front. He looked the other way and I had the opening.
To do it at that moment in Stanley Cup, when you need a goal, and maybe it's a backbreaker for the other team. It's that one that raises your team to, it's like, woohoo! Mario does those things, you know. That's why he's the best.
It was still 4-3 Chicago late in the third when Jaromir Jagr scored the game tire in jaw-dropping fashion.
Backhand, lets it go, he scores!
Well, that was a huge goal for us, and the way he did it at the time was an incredible goal for him to play one-on-one with the centerman and then coming in front, beating another guy, and then beating Belfour between the legs was incredible.
And late in regulation, Lemieux drew a 2-minute penalty to give the Penguins a power play with 17.2 seconds left in the game.
Francis won the draw, Murphy with a shot, the rebound, they score! Lemieux!
They had pretty much a 2-on-0 if the puck went by, but I just took the chance. I read the play as well as I could and felt that Murph was going to get to the puck before the centerman, and got it on net, and I was just in the perfect position to score the winning goal.
No goal has ever done more for the city of Pittsburgh than that one. This building, the Mellon Arena, the roof opens up. It used to. It doesn't anymore. But that night, it literally almost came off. And I have this feeling, because I can remember calling that goal and actually standing up when it was scored, as if the whole city of Pittsburgh could hear the arena, could hear the people in the arena. And I really believe that's what happened, because it was never has been as loud as it was that night when he scored that goal.
Keenan was hardly elated, however, charging that Mario dove to draw the penalty that led to the game-winning goal.
I can't respect Mario for diving. He's the best player in the game, and he's embarrassing other players on the ice as well as embarrassing himself, and I think embarrassing the game.
You know, he's working the refs, and I remember seeing Jeremy Roenick wearing a cast around on his arm in the streets during the playoffs. Nobody knows how what happened there, but that's, he's buying the fact that his team is just not getting they're getting the raw end of the deal.
He was trying to find anything to get his team going, but I think what he did was probably disrupt his team more than help him.
His initial game plan went out the window about halfway through that first game. I remember he was sitting Larmer, he was sitting Roenick, sitting his best players on the ice, and he's playing his fourth line. And they were just planning to play some, rough and tumble, almost goon hockey against us, and we were just kind of like, boys, they're flustered. Whatever we're doing, keep on doing it. And we did. We turned the heat up on them, and they had no answers for us.
We had taken their best, and just thrown it right back in their face.
The Blackhawks never led for a single second of the series after Game 1, but the next 3 games were all close. The Penguins won Game 2 3-1 in Pittsburgh, with Bob Aries scoring a shorthanded goal and Lemieux getting 2 goals from the slot. The Pens won Game 3 in Chicago 1-0 thanks to a Jim Pack shot that deflected off Kevin Stevens and in, and the remarkable goaltending of Tom Barrasso.
He just got that look, and that's the look of a championship goaltender that you need. Not a doubt, boys. I got her tonight, and boy, it was nice to be able to look in your net and see Tommy rise to that level. And he found it all the time in the playoffs, at the right time. And you just knew that he was on his game.
And he was magnificent. He probably should have been the MVP, maybe even in the second Cup year. He was very good, very solid.
I'll go to war with Tommy Barrasso any day, any day.
The 1-0 win put the Penguins up 3-0. And in their 2-year Stanley Cup run, the Penguins had won every single time they'd had a chance to clinch a series.
We never let them get up off the mat. I think that speaks so much volume of what kind of team we had.
Other teams looked at our lineup and maybe at that point didn't think they could beat us. We looked at our lineup and said, we can't be beat.
They could play a speed game, they could play a finesse game, they could play a physical game. They could beat you 6-5 or beat you 1-0. You decide how you want to play, and we'll beat you at your game.
And in the closing minutes of Game 4, Lemieux and Jágr let everyone know what kind of game they like to play by putting on a stick-handling exhibition.
And they both just went into this incredible display of stick-handling ability. You know, it's almost like they were trying to outdo one another. It was Mario and then the new kid showing what he could do, and it was just absolutely spectacular.
30 seconds, 35, 40 seconds. It's just like, whoa, can't get it from them. You know, you start saying, "You're unbelievable."
And when the Penguins held off a final furious assault by the Blackhawks, they were Stanley Cup champions again.
The Penguins are going to win the Stanley Cup, I believe. Stelio shoots it blocked. The Penguins have won the Stanley Cup. Oh, Lord Stanley, get me the brandy.
There was no stopping it. And they were like a freight train rolling down the tracks, you know, with no brakes. I mean, they were just, they weren't stopping until they got the cup. So it was an amazing accomplishment. And they, don't forget, the Hawks had won 11 games coming into that series. So they beat a team that had won 11 in a row on the way to winning 11 in a row.
That's one of the great playoff performances of all time, to win 11 straight against those teams under those circumstances.
That's the best hockey that I've been a part of a team ever. We were just, it was going to happen. There was nothing that was going to stop us.
And despite missing 6 games due to injury, Mario Lemieux led all playoff scorers and won the Conn Smythe Trophy as the Stanley Cup playoff MVP for the 2nd straight year.
It wasn't like he came back and was just, you know, out there. He was back and he was scoring with a broken hand.
He was not only good offensively, he took big face-offs. He killed penalties. He blocked shots. He was determined. There's no doubt in my mind he was MVP. And Mario, hurting, not 100%, was still way better than anybody else. That's how good he was in the playoffs.
As great as Lemieux was and had been, it took a supporting cast to help him become a Stanley Cup champion.
We had a team. We didn't have a bunch of alls. We had a team. You know, our first line was good. Our second line was good. But our third and fourth line were great. You know, with Boki, Blaberry, Trottier, you know, those guys. You know, they had Stanton and Gordy Robb. You know, guys. You know, we wouldn't win without them. You know, everybody talks about the goals I got or Mario got. You know, whoever scored, Ronnie. You know, you don't win without role guys.
Phil Bourque, Troy Loney, Bob Erie, those guys sacrificed themselves.
And that list included the Penguins' vastly underrated defense.
You got to look at guys like Taglianetti, how well he played back there. Jennings, when he had to get in the games. Murphy's much better defensive player than people ever thought he is or thought he was. Roberts played tremendous back there for us. You got Jim Pack, played solid as a rock. Stanton played really strong back there for us.
Just look at the teams that have won cups. They always have the best role players. They're deep from top to bottom, and their third and fourth line guys are guys who can score and also play good defense and do all the things that you need to do to have a successful team.
And the city of Pittsburgh was about to give that successful team one more big party. Some 40,000 fans showed up at Three Rivers on a rainy day to pay tribute again to their Stanley Cup champion Penguins, and Brian Trottier stole the show.
Things were kind of falling down a little bit, so Craig Patrick comes over and he says, hey, you guys want to grab the cup, and maybe a few of you guys just kind of like go out and, you know, lift the cup and get the crowd going here a little bit. And Bobby's like, yeah, let's do that. So Troy goes, come on, Trotch, let's go. And I'm like, well, okay, grab it. So I grab it. So we start walking down the steps, and I think these guys are right behind me. So I start walking, and these guys are on the stage going. I'm like, you dirty rats, you dogs, and they're getting a kick out of it because they just, you're on your own. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? and it's drizzling rain, and I'm looking at that tarp and I'm saying, baseball. Rain delay, go out there, do a little slide, see what happens, see how far I go. So I go trotting over there, woohoo, and away I went. And kind of held on to the cup so nothing bad would happen. It was great.
Brian Trottier knew what the Penguins and their fans would soon find out, that Stanley Cup moments are to be cherished because you never know when they're going to come around again. Many people think the 1992-93 Penguins team was the best in team history. After they won the President's Trophy, though, the Penguins were knocked out in the second round of the playoffs. They've never been back to the Stanley Cup Finals, let alone won another cup. But for 2 magical seasons, the Penguins were the best team in hockey after raising the cup again in '92.
What's this generation coming to? Same great deli taste that's wowed them for generations past. Isley's original chip chopped ham. Fresher, leaner, hammier.
Remember Isley's.
Ask for it now at your supermarket deli.